Boom. How about now? I know there's going to be a delay. How about now? Can you hear me now? Waiting on it. Still can't hear me. Still can't hear me. Oh, it's coming back. It's coming. It's coming. This is where the delay is kind of killer, isn't it? Now you can hear me? Okay. On my end, you should be hearing me now, right? Awesome. That's funny because the chat works with me, okay? So, like, I speak, you chat, or you type, I see it in real time. But you're not hearing my answers for that good 30 to 40 seconds because of the delay. So, all right, restart the intro, Miguel. Of course, I will happily restart the intro for you. Welcome to Virtual History 360, guys. My name is Mr. Wade. Hopefully you are here to review for the Constitutional Amendments test, whether that be in my class, Mr. Santiago's class, or you're just taking a civics class or government class in general. You want to talk about amendments. You are here tonight on this beautiful Wednesday, a little after 8 p.m., so that we can talk about constitutional amendments. Now, so YouTube knows this is not for children. This is for those older teenagers that are just trying to beef up for a test, or for adults that want to learn more about constitutional amendments. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get started. All right. So the test tomorrow, if you have me or Mr. Santiago, the test is going to be a short one. It should be easy. But remember, the trick to doing well on these tests is to learn all of the easy stuff, all that level 1 stuff. You know, I hate to say it, but it does take a good bit of memorization. But you got to know the facts. And then you got to think about them, manipulate them, and put them into practice. So we ask you questions that make you think. I know, we're such bad people. Joking. Okay? So, as we go through this, if you have questions, ask them in the chat. I'll try and answer them as quickly as possible. Again, because of that delay, I know there's a little gap there, but you type it in, I see it, I'll answer it as fast as I can. If I miss anything, you can help each other out in the chat as well. You know, it's a community, we're a family, right? So we're going to work through this. Now, if you're watching this on replay, if you're one of my students, make sure you watch it so that you get this information again. Or 2, if you're just trying to learn, it's okay. Drop a comment and I'll answer it on there, okay? I was actually, before this stream started, I was actually replying to a comment on my 360 video from Corydon, Indiana, where someone shared a story from a different town in Indiana, and maybe learn a new historical stuff, maybe a new 360 video this summer. Who knows? All right, so it looks like the chat is starting up. We've been online for about 5 minutes, it looks like, on my end. So, what do you say we get started talking about constitutional amendments? First question I see on here is how many questions? There's 12. We're focusing on 4 standards, 3 questions each. Boom, there's your 12. Is it hard? I mean, this is the 8th test that I'm giving you guys this year. You know how they are. Again, it comes down to, like we were talking about, where if you know all the little stuff, and you can think about it and not rush, but, you know, try and figure out what the question's actually asking you. I don't think it's hard. I think it's a pretty straightforward test, but again, it all hinges on you not rushing. Because, again, these are written as EOC style questions. They're not just going to be, what color is the sky? Blue, check, move on. They're going to ask you questions that ask you to recall this information, do something with it, and apply it. Okay, so don't stress out over, is it a hard test? You just got to take your time. And that's why we make a short test, because I want to give you enough time. Okay? So, constitutional amendments covers 4 different standards. We can break it down. But honestly, if you want to just think big picture, amendments to the Constitution. What are the questions? Really? Anyway. What are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution called? You should be able to answer that one, right? Yeah, that's a great question. Why is due process an important civil right? Because it makes it fair. Sorry, I got something in my tooth. It makes it fair. Due process of law means everyone has to follow those same steps. And we talk about in different areas. We talk about, criminal, civil suits. We talk about eminent domain, when the government wants to take your property, buy your property, right? They can't just do it. If they want to throw you in jail, they can't just throw you in jail, right? You have to follow the steps. They have to indict you. They have to put you at trial. You have to be found guilty, and you have to be sentenced. It's not a matter of, oh, we don't like this guy. We think he did something wrong. Throw him in jail. No, you are afforded due process because you are innocent until proven guilty. If the government wants to take your land, they have to prove that it's for the public good, and they have to pay you fair compensation for that. Thank you, Skylar. I appreciate that. And yes, it is the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments. Now, there's 100 videos, thousands of videos on YouTube that talks about these. You can watch my video from my channel from Mr. Haber, where he talks about the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment. I mean, if you think about it, why are those important, those 5 freedoms? Let me back up a second. Why are all of these freedoms important? Speaking of the Bill of Rights just specifically for now, why were they necessary? You know, when the Constitution was being ratified, you had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And the Federalists made a great case for why, you know, the Constitution was good. And I think they were right, but they missed the key part. And what the main argument of the Anti-Federalists was that we needed this Bill of Rights for what? Why did we need the Bill of Rights? Skylar, you're going to finish. That's all I can say. You'll have the time to finish. Okay? Which one could you not? Oh, I don't finish the questions that are for the test. Oh, sorry. Maybe I misunderstood you. You're talking about for the study guide, right? Remember, look up the standards itself, okay? Did I answer your question? I think I understood you. Okay. For the study guide, guys, kind of shifting gears. If you're working on the study guide tonight, just look up the standard. So if it's SS.7.C.2.4 or whatever of the 4 standards I gave you to look up, just look up that standard. If you can't find the specific video, you can still find the information. Okay? Because again, the beauty of this unit is that it's all review. All right. It looks like people are answering my one question there. They are to protect our rights. To protect our rights from who, though? Let's take it to the next step. Who do we need protection from? All right, and Skylar, let me know if I answered that question for you. Who do we need that protection from? We need to protect our rights, but from who? You got it, Skylar. I'm not worried. You trust me. You'll be able to figure it out. So who do we need protection from? Avatar Online, if you don't keep it clean or calm and respectful, you're going to get booted. I won't warn you again. Yes, Miguel, Skylar, it is the government that we're protecting from. So all of these rights that we're going to be talking about, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. I want you to keep it focused on the fact that we need to keep the government in check. We need to keep the government from overstepping its bounds and keep the government from taking away our rights. Okay? So that's going to be our focus. So, talking about the First Amendment, 5 freedoms. You know, we have speech, petition, assembly. Oh, what am I missing? Oh, I gave you 3. Speech, petition, assembly. There's 2 more. Can you fill it in for me? Speech, petition, assembly. What's the 4th and 5th? Five freedoms of the First Amendment. Speech, petition, assembly. But what are those last 2? You know, because speech means we can criticize the government. Doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. You know, there's still going to be consequences if you lie about someone or you just shout whatever you want. People are going to get upset with you. You get fired from your job, stuff like that. But you can criticize the government. The Supreme Court will side with you if you're making a political statement. You know, assembly, as long as it's peaceable, you are allowed to get in groups. That also ties into association, like joining a political group. And then petition means you can, you know, complain to the government and, you know, petition them to make changes. And then Skylar jumping in. Freedom of religion, freedom of press. Thank you, Dark Night Star Black. There you go. We got the religion and press. Speaking on religion, the government can't force you to follow a religion. There is no state religion in the United States because there are a multitude of them and the government can't tell you, right? Excuse me. And they also can't stop you from practicing your own. Freedom to practice, freedom not to practice, totally up to you, right? Freedom of the press, that's a big one, okay? I always use the example of North Korea, right? You know, who controls the press in North Korea? The government. The government can say whatever it wants. Is there anything stopping the government from either lying to you or stopping that government from, withholding information from you? No. So that's why the freedom of press is so important, because it keeps the government from, I don't want to say keeps the government honest, because, that's a whole other debate for another day. But it does keep the government, on its toes, because other people are independently fact-checking it. Now, you can talk about bias, and I think that's, a fair statement. I think that's a fair statement, because everyone has their own agenda. So that's why it's always important to look at multiple sources, if you're talking about the press, multiple sources, and try and find as middle of the road as information as possible so that it's not, always slanted or skewed one way. That way you can fill in the complete picture yourself. That's your responsibility as a citizen to, become fully informed. That's where it comes from, okay? All right, so covered the First Amendment. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. We'll get to that when we get to DCV Heller in our next unit on Supreme Court cases. Third Amendment, we're not going to really talk about quartering troops, but now we get into 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are collectively what we call covering the rights of the accused. Hannah asks, how does self-incrimination support the right to due process? Well, this is coming out of the Fifth Amendment, right? We are innocent until proven guilty, right? That's the whole purpose of going to trial. Due process means you must be proven guilty before you can be punished. If you are going to take away someone's life, liberty, or property, execution, liberty or freedom, throw you in jail, property, take your house, right? Due process has to be followed. Self-incrimination means trying to read the chat while I'm answering this. Self-incrimination just means you don't have to rat yourself out. If they're trying to throw you in jail, they have to prove that you are guilty. You don't have to do it for them. If the enforcement branch, now we're talking about the police that arrest you, or the prosecutor, the district attorney, if they want to throw you in jail, it's their job to prove that you did the crime. Let's see. I don't know what's going on in chat, but you guys need to straighten it out and clean it up. That's the whole purpose of this, is to help you guys. Don't ruin it for everyone. Trey, isn't the Fifth and First Amendment kind of the same by having 5 rights in them? Yeah, that's true. Of course, the fifth one that we talk about in the Fifth Amendment is eminent domain, which seems like it's kind of out of left field, but it fits, because it's due process. All right. Where were we? So, rights of the accused, right? You're asking about the Fifth and self-incrimination, right? Now, where were we? So, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. Police can't just search your house, right? They have to have probable cause. And if it's instant or dangerous, they can search right away, or with probable cause, get a warrant where a judge will say, you know what, you have the right to go search. Then they can search, but they have to do it the right way. Make sense? Now, if they don't have that and they search, that's where you can, appeal up and say my Fourth Amendment was violated. Fifth Amendment, we talked about self-incrimination. Double jeopardy applies into that, where they only get one chance to convict you, right? Skylar, I put him in timeout for 5 minutes, so we'll see if he comes back. If not, he'll get booted. Okay? We're going to keep this clean. We're going to keep this respectful. Okay? All right. Sixth Amendment, Seventh Amendment, kind of very similar. Seventh Amendment focuses more on civil trials, rights to when someone's suing you, 6th criminal, when it talks about the right to a lawyer. That's a constitutional right to be represented because the law is complicated and people aren't experts in it. Does that make sense? So you have a right to a lawyer. Well, when we talk about Gideon v. Wainwright next unit, that's what that talks about. 8th Amendment, that's cruel and unusual punishment. So I've been talking a lot. Let me ask you guys another question. 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, right? Hannah, I'm going to get to your question in just a second, but let me ask you about the 8th Amendment. Would you consider the death penalty to be cruel and unusual? What do you think? So, cruel and unusual punishment, the death penalty. Let me know. And while you're thinking or waiting for my delay, I'll answer Hannah's question. Why does the 9th Amendment add to the constitutional rights and liberties? Because the framers of the Constitution, these feds and anti-feds, these people that were debating it back in the 18th century, they knew they didn't know everything. They knew that times would change. They knew they could miss something. So they kind of lumped everything into one. So like the one big example that the 9th Amendment technically covers, and we focus on the 4th, is privacy. Privacy is not in the Constitution. Okay? But you have a right to, reasonable privacy. That's lumped into the 9th Amendment. It's not listed, but it's not given to the government either. Therefore, it belongs to the people. Now, when we talk about as the 4th Amendment, we talk about search and seizure. The government can't search your property, but it's not necessarily because of privacy. It's because of their probable cause and being able to search rightfully. But privacy itself technically falls under the 9th Amendment, and the word isn't in the Constitution. Okay? Most important thing to know about the 19th Amendment is that it was, the first time that women were federally, nationally, completely granted the right to vote. You had the 15th Amendment that gave it to men of all races, but still no women. But it wasn't until 1920, 100 years ago, which there's going to be a 360 video from Nashville and a collaboration with Mr. Beat about the 20th Amendment, or the 19th Amendment, excuse me. So what you need to know about the 19th Amendment is that it's women's right to vote, which in class today, a lot of people were confusing it. They kept saying sexuality instead of sex. It doesn't have to do with your, sexuality. It has to do with your gender. It gave women the right to vote. Okay? So still waiting on an answer for my question about the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. What's going on? Do you think the death penalty qualifies as cruel and unusual? What do you guys think? Let me go through my notes while I'm waiting for you to answer that. Alright, any answers so far? Not yet? What does what mean, Skylar? Alright. How are we doing, guys? Not much talk on this. What's going on? Waiting on the question there. Cruel and unusual? Death penalty? What does that mean, my question? Do you think the government executing people for committing heinous crimes is cruel and unusual? That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so yes is very cruel. Okay, but remember the 8th Amendment protects cruel and unusual. Keyword there is and. The punishment can be cruel, the punishment can be unusual, but it has been interpreted that cruel and unusual. Okay, cruel, not cool. Cruel, C-R-U-E-L, yes. What are we thinking, guys? All right, we're almost through the Bill of Rights. guys aren't very chatty tonight. Chat's hardly moving. Someone talk to me. That's why I do a live stream. I could just make a random review video, but I'd rather talk to you guys live. So ask those questions, guys. We're about 20 minutes in, give or take. Just checking on my notes here. What do you got? Talk to me. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on. So going through, how does the government balance individual liberties and rights with community rights? Ooh, that's a very specific question. I think comes from your study guide. How does the government balance individual liberties with community rights? Well, I think what it comes down to is you got to focus on safety. If what you are doing is causing an issue or putting someone in danger or causing risk for someone, then the government's going to step in, whether it be the city, the county, the police, the government, or the governor, depending on the scope. But if it takes away someone else's rights, your rights will be limited. And again, that's life, liberty, properties, right? If you focus on that. If you are going to do something, even if by itself is fine and doesn't mess with anyone, but by doing it now you're taking away someone else's rights, your rights will be limited. If you're putting someone in danger, if it takes away safety, the example of yelling fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire, what happens? People rush to the exit, people could get trampled, could get hurt. That's why you can't do that. Okay? Excuse me. All right, how we doing, guys? You guys aren't very chatty on this whole, Eighth Amendment death penalty thing, so we talked about being cruel. One person hit that. So does it matter the way that they execute people? As long as the method of execution doesn't hit cruel and unusual, is the death penalty still okay then? If they find quote unquote more humane forms of execution, which is oxymoronic to say it, but what do you think? I think it makes a difference, right? It's hard for the court to interpret it one way if you're making the argument that cruel and unusual is not met. If they're trying to find less painful and easy forms of execution, then guess what? It's not cruel and unusual at that point. Okay? Let's see, what else do we need to talk about? Wait on the questions to roll in. I'll answer them as we go. And at the end, I'll go back and I'll circle back and review everything that we've talked about. Let's see, before we move on out of the Bill of Rights, actually, let me just circle back on that. Remember, we talked about the First Amendment, is protecting you from the government. All these rights are protecting you from the government, right? So, if you want to petition the government, if you want to, speak out against the government, that's protected. If you want to practice your own religion, that's protected. If you want to report on what the government's doing and share, if you find information on the government and you share that out, that's freedom of the press. You write, if you're writing an article about the government, you are protected because the government can't censor that. Now, we'll talk about Hazelwood V Kuhlmeier, where it was a school newspaper and it's a little different. But for the most part, if you're reporting about the U.S. government in a private paper, the government can't step in. Now, private paper can do what it wants, but the government can't stop them. All right, and then we talked about the Fifth Amendment. Remember, we talked about double jeopardy, self-incrimination. Don't forget the property rights. Okay, eminent domain, that fifth part, that's kind of the new piece that was added to this unit. So we're hitting that. What else do we got? We talked about the death penalty. We talked about cruel and unusual punishment, the Eighth Amendment. That one always sticks out. All right. Well, what about these other amendments that we've talked about? Let's move on out of the Bill of Rights, and we'll talk about the other ones. We had the Reconstruction Amendments, and we had the Voting Amendments, right? There's others, like the 20th and 22nd, but you need to know those, but that deals with presidential. We talked about that with the executive branch. But like the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. 13th Amendment, you read that article about Lincoln, right? Abolish slavery. First time slavery is mentioned in the Constitution is the abolition of it, right? The word itself, I should say. 14th Amendment, this is a big one, okay? The 14th Amendment was citizenship rights. If you are born here, you're naturalized, you get citizenship rights. Okay. 26th Amendment, that was 18-year-olds. All right. Actually, that's 24th. Hold on. You got me thinking. Sorry. Train of thoughts in the 14th Amendment. Yeah, 26 is 18. I'm verifying it. Because I don't want to give you wrong information. Listen, if you can't handle this, you're gone. It's that simple. Alright, I'll get to the 26th Amendment because that was a Vietnam Amendment. We'll get back to that. Alright? But the 14th Amendment, we're going to hit that one, okay? This is a big one. This is also the Equal Protection Clause, okay? Equal protection meaning everyone is protected. This is big because now for the first time it's protecting you against state laws. You see, the Supreme Court never took on a case that was, dealing with state laws before this amendment came through because they said, listen, the Bill of Rights and the amendments leading up to it were all federal, national level. Now, with the 14th Amendment, if a state tries to violate your constitutional rights, you can now appeal up to the Supreme Court. They would actually listen to that. Okay? 15th Amendment, that was voting rights. I mentioned it earlier. For men, regardless of race. Obviously being a Reconstruction Amendment, it went back to the abolition of slavery. This was dealing with former slaves, trying to enfranchise them so that they could vote, so that they could then be part of society. But you'll find that white Southerners, no easy way to put this, didn't like that. Okay? So, that's why we get to the acts, the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 68, the Voting Rights Act of 65. These were necessary because even though there were constitutional amendments, there were people fighting back. Okay? All right. Let's see. 24th Amendment, that was kind of along the same lines of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. It was a poll tax. They couldn't say you aren't allowed to vote, but what did they do? They charged you a tax, which it wasn't a large sum of money, but it was enough that if you were a poor person and you had to choose between eating or voting, it was enough that you would choose eating and not voting. Okay? It was a way to keep people silent. Okay? All right, where were we? Let's see. Slavery was a choice. You honestly think that? Tell that to the people that got drug on boats. Cross an entire ocean to a new continent. Put in chains. Again, if you guys can't handle this, I just go back to doing review videos. I try to do this to help you out. Don't ruin it. It's sad that I have to have this conversation. Unreal. Yeah, I don't get you. All right. You know what? We're going to move on. We're going to wrap this up. Because, yeah. We're going to bring back the focus. Where was we? Where were we? 19th Amendment, women got the right to vote. 24th Amendment, no poll taxes. This kind of goes along with the Voting Rights Act of 65, which allowed all African Americans to be able to vote. 26th Amendment was a Vietnam-era amendment. If you're old enough to fight and die for the country, you should be old enough to vote. Unreal. Unreal. Yeah, we're done. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments. I'll get to them. Ask me in class tomorrow. Make sure your study guides are finished. I'm going to check them tomorrow. It's funny. It's funny. You guys think it's okay to act? Teachers get backlash. No, this doesn't hurt me. This hurts you guys. I'm giving up my evening to talk to you, and this is how you're going to act? No, it doesn't work that way. Test tomorrow. Good luck.